You are listening to the GodArchy podcast, where we shove a crowbar between state and church. This is the spot where Christian faith intersects with libertarian anarchism and voluntaryism. I'm your host, Mike Meharry. In this episode, we're going to talk about living free in an unfree world. Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into the GodArchy podcast. As always, I very much appreciate the fact that you've taken a little bit of time out of your day to listen to the show. So if you are a regular listener to GodArchy, you know that I talk a lot of political philosophy and theology on the show. I talk a lot about the fact that government is illegitimate from a moral and ethical standpoint, that it is based on violence, coercion, and force, and that the moral authority of the state is death. It is literally antichrist. And I talk about the fact that ordering society with a bunch of people in charge holding guns and yelling at us through bullhorns is not the best way to organize society. And I think it's very important to communicate these things too. Talk about these ideas because they're not widely known and they're not widely understood. And until people begin to change the way they think, we're not going to have any actual change in the way things are. You know, changes in thought always precede changes in action. John Adams talked about after the Revolutionary War, he talked about the fact that the real revolution was a revolution in thought, and we need to have that. But in the meantime, we still have government, right? We're still living under the heel of the boot, so to speak. We have to deal with government every day. We've got the IRS, we've got the wars, all of these things are happening, and that raises another question. How do we deal with that now? In the here and now, in practical ways. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. How do we, as the great Harry Brown put it, live free in an unfree world? So that's the theme of the show today. And to talk about this, we're going to be speaking with Tricia Stuart. Tricia is a longtime friend. She is a proud anarchist. She uses the term without hesitation. We talked about that a little bit, actually. She's also a believer. She's a Christian. And she is a content creator. She is the host of the Ginger Archy podcast. And really good friend, somebody I really respect. And she's been posting a lot on her social media platforms about this idea of how do we live free? How do we minimize the impact of government on our lives? How do we live better? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Living free in an unfree world. Before we bring Tricia on, I want to let you know how you can support GodArchy if you are inclined to do so. Several ways that you can support this show and the other work that we're doing over at GodArchy.org. First off, share the show. Tell your friends about it. Share our social media posts. You know, Facebook and Twitter, their algorithms aren't real keen on this kind of thing. But the more things get shared, the more people will see them. And it'll boost those algorithms. So please share the episodes. Let people know what's going on. Be active on the GodArchy Facebook page and just share that content. That really helps me a whole lot, and I really appreciate the folks who take just a few clicks to do that. Secondly, if you would like to financially support GodArchy and support me, you can do that through our website, GodArchy.org, and you will see a place supporting listeners, and you can click on that link, and it'll tell you exactly what you can do to support the show financially. And there are some perks for supporting the show financially, and you'll see those on the page, and also you'll hear about it at the end of the show. So I do want to give something back. Another thing that we do is that once we get to the point that it makes sense, I'm going to be giving 40% of what GodArchy brings in support, we're going to pass that on to other organizations, other folks who may be in need, to kind of be, kind of create that voluntary community that we would like to see. So if you want to be part of that, go to godarchy.org, click on the supporting listener link and follow the instructions, and I will greatly appreciate it. If you don't want to do that, you can also support the show through PayPal. There's a PayPal donation link on the page, and also would love to get support with crypto. And I have links on godarchy.org where you can donate either Bitcoin or Ethereum. So really do appreciate all the folks who do support the show. And if you want to join them, you can do that right there on the website. I used to have a Patreon, and when I kind of took a year off, most people know this, but I took a year off when my mom was sick. And when I came back, I'm like, I'm trying to minimize my exposure to social media platforms and censors and all of those things as much as possible. So I wanted to move it all to my own website. And another thing that you can do, I almost forgot about this, go to godarchy.org and sign up for our email newsletter. I send it out once a week. I'm not going to spam you. I'm not going to share your information with anybody else. But you will get an email every week. I usually send it out on Sunday morning, and try to just have a little tidbit for you to think about and talk about what's on the show, what's on the website, so that you can keep up. Because again, Facebook algorithms, Twitter algorithms, they're not going to show a lot of the content to you. So if you want to keep up with what's going on, join our email list and keep up with it that way. So that's enough of the business. Let's get into this interview and discussion with my good friend, Tricia Stuart. Tricia, thanks so much for being on the GodArchy podcast. How are you, my friend?
I am doing wonderfully. I have a slight cold, but other than that, life is going swimmingly.
Oh, swimmingly. Yes.
Yes.
Indeed. You're getting your fall cold early.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I just brought out my fall decorations. Don't laugh. I'm one of those girls.
Oh, that's, it's September.
Well,
now,
it's after Labor Day.
In Florida, we have fall in January.
Yeah. I'm not going to feel bad for you.
No, I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't miss it. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring you on. You're one of my favorite social media feeds, just because, so much of what you post, it just makes me go, huh. And so I want to talk about a couple of things, particularly in relation, just kind of how are we going to get by in this crazy world that we're in. But before I do that, I want to talk just a little bit of background. And you and I both came from kind of the same place. You came from the right, am I correct?
I did.
Yeah. So how did you get from the right to anarchist? How does that happen?
I jokingly say memes, but they did play a small part.
Sure.
But I, was a big conservative. I would call myself a neoconservative.
Yeah, me
Rush
too.
baby.
Mm-hmm.
Worked a little bit for the Republican Party.
Yep.
And I started questioning a few things. I had always questioned in my head, one being war,
right,
and about legislating morality. And I had read this book, which actually is not really political, although later on realizing she's a libertarian. It's called Free Range Kids.
Okay, yeah.
Lenore Skenazy.
Yeah.
And it gave me these ideas about not controlling your children and not worrying about, fixing society so much as letting them experience things and give them a good grounding. And that was backed up by facts. And it just, for some reason, that book made me think, I was wrong. And this lady has a lot of points. And maybe I need to think a little more freely. And I kind of just, I know it sounds like a strange way to start, but I kind of just started applying that to everything in my life, including my faith. Obviously my politics, the way I was raising my children, and kind of went from there, did the old, I'm a big L for a while.
Yeah.
Although I still am registered with the Libertarian Party, just
Me
because
too.
I like some of their work on issues and things like that.
Sure.
And legislation. But then, started doing that and then questioning, okay, are, little guns better than big guns in the hands of politicians?
Right.
And then just being, consistent, I went down the path to, okay, I guess I am an anarchist because I don't need any government. So.
Yeah. My friend Andrew Avery, he posts on Facebook about every 2 or 3 days. Well, how much government did you need today? I didn't need any.
Yes. Well, I think, everybody's got those holdouts. I think I had you on my show and you talked about those too. One
Yeah.
of my last holdouts was police. And that's actually one of my strongest issues that I actually have done work on and I'm most passionate about. But I'm just like, we need the police. And of course we need policing. It just doesn't have to be
Security.
done by government. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
So, and now I'm very much for police accountability. And that's a huge part of why I try to spread anarchy.
Do you like the term anarchy? I know you use it a lot. I kind of avoid it. I usually say voluntarist. Why do you like the term? Because most people think anarchy. They think that you're burning garbage cans.
Oh yes, yeah, knocking over trash cans and throw Molotov cocktails and such. No, I kind of refuse to give that term up on purpose. And occasionally I do use voluntarist, especially when I'm talking about voluntary action,
right?
Instead of inaction, as far as like charity. So I like to associate those two things together. But I feel like I'm not going to let somebody steal that word from me. I'm going to bring it back to what I believe the definition should be. I know there are technically two definitions of anarchism.
Sure.
Yes, because every edgelord in the universe has schooled me on this.
Right. We love our pendants in the in the liberty movement. Somebody told me that pendant isn't a thing. It is. It's somebody who's pedantic is a pendant. Yes. And there are a lot of pendants in our little world.
Oh, yes.
Yes. I'm sure somebody will probably correct my pronunciation or something like that.
Oh, I get that. I'm sure you do too. And what's funny is you're a writer, and I try to proofread. I'm not a writer. I'm good in very short form.
Right.
But there's always somebody that completely misses the point or the joke or whatever, and is just there to let me know that I misspelled something or missed a comma.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And it's, nobody can self-edit. It's not, self-editing is not a thing.
Yeah.
That's a whole different subject for a different day. But yeah, it's impossible. I mean, it's the way our brains are wired. When we read something that we wrote, we read it in the way that we think we wrote it. So
yes, it's like when you think, okay, and I'll proofread. I'm like, this looks good. I'll put it up, and I'll even do this with like show notes and stuff. And then I put it up. I thought, oh my God, I can't believe that it was staring right at me, and it's so wrong.
Yeah, I oftentimes get my wife, if it's something that I think is going to get some traction, I'll get my wife to look over, and she'll find all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I do the same with my husband, and he's a bit of a writer and a poet, and so he'll help me edit.
Yeah. So okay, I like that. To take that word back, I think that's kind of Michael Malice. I think that's kind of his idea too. That why should we let the dirtbags have our definitions, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I do understand, like in some situations, it might get a gasp, and people are doing it for that. But that's also a great attention grabber,
right?
It's like, well, what do you think? Well, why don't you think you need government, or why are you violent? And then you can say, that's actually not what it is. And it leads into a great discussion, unless you just start screaming that somebody is a statist.
What? You don't think that's effective?
No. And I think everybody goes through that time, when you first become an anarchist and realize that you are, and most people aren't,
right?
Where you feel quite self-righteous. And that should probably only last a couple hours. And occasionally, I mean, I can still get like that occasionally when it's just like I'm talking to somebody and it's like, oh, forget it. You are.
Yeah. I mean, there are certain people, I say this with, you talk about sharing the gospel with people, and it's kind of in a way, there's some parallels in the way that works. And there's some people that will ask questions about my faith, and I know they genuinely care. I love to discuss things with them, but there are some people out there, especially out there in social media, who really just want to argue, right? They're atheists, and they're not going to change their mind, and they want to argue with you. I refuse to do it. It's not worth my time. And there are certain people in the political realm that, I don't know, at some point, I think it becomes almost more effective. And I hate to mock people, but just reveal the big giant holes in their thinking.
Yes. Yeah. I use sarcasm a lot that way, just because it's at some point, that number one, their intentions are probably not honest, because you've seen them do this 1,000 times before, and they're not really trying to listen. They're just trying to, speak back at you. So I'll do that too. And then, of course, sometimes being female, it's assumed that I wasn't being sarcastic and that I'm stupid.
Right.
So I get a lot of that too.
Yes, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Yes. So, we live in this world, so it's so politically divided, and it seems like we're getting more and more.
Hmm.
It's the chasm between is getting bigger. I grew up in the '80s, and it was like there was some animosity, but then it seems like in the Clinton years it got bigger, and then Obama got bigger, and we had the Tea Party, and then Trump put divisiveness in hyperdrive, and now today it's almost um, like there's so much space in between you can't even see either side.
I,
Um,
I definitely think so. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's always been like that. It really hasn't. I
no,
think if you go from the 80s and you look at the Rush Limbaugh movement in the late 80s, where people were listening to talk radio, so
right,
they were getting information differently than
hmm
the nightly news or the newspaper, which, a lot of those guys were there to embolden people and make them angry because that, catches your attention
right.
and, help
It's
your
good for
sponsors
ratings.
like that. Yeah. Um, and then we go into the information age where everybody's got the internet in their home, and then all of a sudden social media. And it's just like there's more ways to dislike somebody now than there were
Right.
back then.
Well, and you posted something the other day that caught my eye. You said the biggest problem with the left and the right is that they hold up shields against reason in order to protect their teams.
Yes.
And I've seen that so much, and it's not one side or the other; it's both sides. I mean, I got in this conversation the other day with somebody that was talking about the inflation and the spending, and I was just pointing out that the Trump administration spent an awful lot of money, right?
Yeah.
No, it's all Biden's fault, and it's like I literally gave them numbers, and they refused to believe it. It's like
Right.
how do you even?
It's funny because I think something that inspired that was I might have recorded a show about inflation or something like that.
Mhm.
And it really was that exact same scenario
Yeah,
where you're like, actually, if you can go back and look at them re-upping the CARES Act and what was spent beforehand, this was always going in this direction. And people literally that I know are not stupid, are not economically illiterate,
mhm.
will pretty much say, well, that's not really him, or he didn't really, or this what we need to look at what's happening now. And it's like, yeah, but if you can't learn from them, then you're just going to repeat it.
Exactly.
And that whole Trump is a savior thing is so strange to me,
Yeah.
coming from anarchists, especially.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. And I think there's a pretty strong element in, I'll say, our movement that is kind of the same. It's almost like a third team, and there's
Yeah, yeah.
and there's some of the same dynamics, and then I think I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. There is a pretty large contingent in the so-called liberty movement that seems the strategy seems to be get control of government and use government to basically impose liberty.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah. That's like, I would say like 2018, I think that kind of started. I mean, there's always been that,
sure.
but I think even amongst like people that would consider themselves voluntarists, or I guess they feel like that's the only way that they can win or make a difference. Um, and the Libertarian Party, like I don't want to sit here and crap all over the Libertarian Party,
Right.
because some people do some really good work. I mean, in the
Absolutely.
Ohio legislature, they've been up there and uh, putting up bills against qualified immunity and getting
Right.
people to actually listen at the state house.
Hmm.
So that's important stuff.
Yeah.
And it's also a good place for people to start that might not know.
Sure.
But as far as that being your savior, congratulations on 0.003,
Right.
because nobody cares other than
Right.
that.
Right.
And it seems like a weird flex, like, and I see this left and right libertarians, which
Yeah.
not that I necessarily think that's a real thing, but people, divide socially into those. The
Absolutely.
left, like they're like foaming at the mouth at these right libertarians, and their whole life is obsessed with hating them.
Hmm.
And it's like, and the other people are obsessed with winning. And it's like, you guys took this tiny little thing and you made it even worse. It
Exactly.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, I've made that joke before. You've got 30 people that have divided up into 28 camps,
Yes.
and they're all fighting. Meanwhile, the other 99.9% of the world doesn't know you exist.
Yes,
and
I
it's
know.
almost like the delusions of grandeur kind of thing that you get. And it's easy because we do tend to, especially because of social media, we do tend to kind of congregate in our own little circles. So it's easy to believe that we're bigger and more influential than actual reality.
Yeah, and when in actuality, people that do actually, when you get ballot access and that do click on libertarian, are generally not people that are true hardcore diehard libertarians. Right. Obviously, the ones that do, but they're mostly there because they're like, oh, it's a third choice.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid
these two
they
are
sit
so
down
awful.
and listen to us talk, and they might be like, never mind, I'll just go back.
Can I have that back?
Yeah, so that's not most people that vote libertarian on national ticket. So it's not. I don't think that being pure or catering to the left or to the right or this that really matters all that much. If somebody doesn't like the left and right and they're not, or they don't happen to be a big L card carrying libertarian, they'll probably check that box anyway. Yeah. And I mean, good for them. At least they thought a little bit outside the box.
Right. So. Have you had much interaction with some of the post-libertarian thought where it's kind of this, and it seems to be kind of motivated from the right? And the mentality is that you have to have power. There will always be power. We're going to take power and we're going to cram it down your throat.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I have seen a lot of that rise up over the last couple of years. And this is what's funny. I hate to say this because for a long time I would roll my eyes when I would see the media say this, especially like mainstream. Oh, well, it's this libertarianism is a pathway to the alt-right. It's not. That's not what true libertarianism. Right. However, if you congregate in these circles and you get so angry when you don't win all the time and all you're worried about is power, well, that's kind of where you're going to head. You know what I mean? A very authoritarian way. I'm going to tell this person how to live. I'm going to win this. And it's sad because it's almost like you started somewhere and you got angry at somebody for doing that to you and trying to rule your life. So you decided you wanted to be free and you wanted to treat other people like that. And now you just looped all the way back to where you were at the beginning. And I don't understand that.
Right. It's almost a vengeance kind of thing. And I mean, I have a couple of friends who are really in that camp that we're going to get control. And when we do, we're going to punish those MFers. And it's kind of frightening. I mean, I've always been of the opinion, and this comes from my faith, that any kind of violent revolution is ultimately going to fail, because you're building something on the exact same thing that you're trying to fight. Right? We're ultimately frustrated with people trying to control our lives, using power to control our lives. Well, if you're using power, then you're just going to end up with another form of power, and somebody's still going to end up getting controlled. And ultimately, I think when it comes to political power, it always ends up getting pointed back at me at some point in the game. It's the power is the problem. So I've always been of the opinion that when it comes to political action, the real key is to devolve that power as much as possible, not try to increase it, thinking that you're going to get it and be able to do something with it. Because, even if a good guy has it, everybody down here in Florida loves Ron DeSantis. Not everybody, but a lot of libertarians think that Ron DeSantis is the best thing since sliced bread. And I did a Facebook post the other day about the fact that we had a border checkpoint that Ron DeSantis implemented here in Florida. Like, they were literally stopping cars at the state line. To me, that indicates maybe not so freedom loving, and yet, there's that. I guess there's always that appeal of power, and I'm not sure how you get people to let go of that.
Well, I think in the DeSantis case, which is a great example of what these people, it's because he did a couple things that were decent. So you hang on to that because he won. So, oh, look, here's the guy that won doing something we like. Therefore, we're going to hitch our wagon to his star. And it's like, but wait a minute. Like, look at look at the star first, Right. And they do that with Trump. And then the left will do that too. And it's like, you talk about how Joe Biden would be so great and he's doing this and that. Do you not realize like what he did in the 80s with the drug war?
Right.
He's not your hero either, even if you're a huge, social welfare fan. But,
well, and he just, if you believe the rhetoric of the left, especially the old left, being anti-war. I mean, Biden's ratcheting up the war in Somalia even as we speak. So, it's
no Democrat or Republican is anti-war.
yeah, exactly.
That just, I mean, maybe Ron Paul was, but he never
Right.
really got to do anything.
Exactly. So that kind of brings me to the core of what I kind of wanted to talk to you about, because we've known each other for quite a while. I was trying to think today of when we actually connected. It's been a while.
I think it was in that group that I used to be in.
The Make Liberty
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would have been like 2017,
17?
maybe?
Yeah. So I've noticed in your messaging a bit of an evolution away from talking so much about political action. And we've talked about, we're obviously both involved in legislative things because we want to roll back the state. But I've noticed that you've been talking a lot recently about, hey, how can me, or in your case, you, and my family kind of shield ourselves from all of this government power that is being
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that. What's first off, am I right in my perception that you've kind of been shifting in that direction, and if so, why?
You're 100% correct. I think part of it was just getting tired of fighting for a system that wasn't really going to change, or picking a battle to the point where it's just like evangelism. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to anarchism that are like faith, which was why my faith very much changed in the way that I acted and the way I treated my fellow human beings once I became an anarchist. It's like you can only do what you can do in your circle. You can only do what you can do for your family. And here's some things that work, and these people are called agorists, or they practice agorism. They might not necessarily be in a world. There's things called gray markets. There's nullification. There's all kinds of things that you can do right now that actually do affect your life and make change, including like being a good neighbor to somebody.
Right.
I have more say over the lady next door than anybody on the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's like, who am I fighting? Who am I even talking to at this point if I can't try to do something better in my life for my family and my friends?
Yeah. It's almost like lifestyle evangelism. And I think you hit on something that's very true for me too. I came to a point in my life where I was trying to start to reconcile my worldview, big picture, right? And realizing that my political views and my faith and so many things did not match up, right? So I'm trying to make my worldview coherent. And it's like, wait a minute, my faith, the things that Jesus teaches me, actually fit into this thing called anarchism. The whole idea of love your neighbor, the idea that we treat others as we want to be treated. I mean, it is, in some ways it's simple, and yet it's much more difficult to live your life that way than it is to yell at somebody on social media, right?
Yeah. And a lot of, that whole idea of evangelizing in lifestyle, like showing people who you are and imitating what Christ did, it doesn't have a lot to do with pointing fingers and yelling at people. It's pointing a finger to yourself and looking inward. If you think what that person, how they're living is wrong, then look inward or show them it's better. You don't need, if you go and poke them in the chest, well, guess what? You're probably doing something that they saw, that's incorrect as well. I mean, that's basic scripture, but it's so funny as, American evangelical Christians. I grew up, my parents were church planters. They were Reformed. And a lot of cool stuff came from that too. So I'm not like, they had a wonderful church family, and, I know a lot of scripture because having been study and stuff like that. But it's like this whole, we want our cake and eat it too thing. Like we want to claim that we have salvation, we're this and that, but also look at us Americans, and we're soldiers marching out to war, and Jesus loves us. And, it's like, you don't get to be both, know what I mean? You can't be this grand master and king on earth and also be like Christ, because that doesn't match up.
Yeah. They're antithetical to each other.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of that, I came to realize that, and a lot of my faith also was intertwined in my political beliefs when I was a statist.
Same.
And so, it's kind of scary. And now looking back at some of the things, I don't know if you ever get those Facebook memories.
Yes.
Sometimes I'll screenshot them and share them with my friends who are like hardcore agorists or anarchists, just because it's so cringy. Like, I'm just like, I cried at the Star Spangled Banner, or
Right.
this and that, and I'm like, wow, I should probably be crying at Amazing Grace and not the Star Spangled
Yes.
Banner.
Here's my dirty little secret from the
Oh, do
past.
share.
I actually had a blog for a while, probably 2010-ish, that basically all I was doing was reposting Department of Defense news releases. It was all apologetics for the warfare state, because we were making freedom. We were making freedom all over the place, Yeah. And I've people that listen to the show know that was one of the things, that was one of my last things, was the whole war, because I grew up in that environment of America is great and we're going to be great by ruling the world, and everybody's a danger. And it's weird, and this will shock people, I think, to some people, but people are like, right now, China's the big boogeyman, right? Russia and China, but China's the big boogeyman. What if China takes over? I was thinking the other day, what if China does take over? How will my life really be that different?
Yeah.
I mean, I have different overlords. They may be worse. I don't know. And that gets back to what we were talking about. All I can really do is try to make my life as much in my control as possible, right? So one of the things I wanted to ask you, one of the things that my wife and I have really been intentional about over the last few years is eliminating debt. We don't want to have any debt at all, other than obviously we're always going to have property taxes because we own a house. I can't get rid of that. But I don't have a mortgage. I've paid off the credit cards. We're trying to get rid of all. What are some things that you're doing with your family to try to be able to be less dependent on government or the system as it is?
Yeah. So a couple of things come to mind. And part of that is, unfortunately, we had some occurrences with the IRS in the state of Ohio.
Yeah.
So we had some financial setbacks. But one of the things I learned from that is, what can we cut back on to build back up?
Mm-hmm.
And I drive a 20-year-old van.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to go out and just lease a brand new fancy vehicle. But you know what? Then I'm going to be a slave to the payment and how much my car insurance goes up.
Right.
And this gives me more freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing is, my youngest, who is our pleasant surprise,
yes,
Myra, she'll be 2 in December, but she'll be unschooled.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that the state can control over my child or over herself, they won't be able to, because we're going to lead her in a creative way. She'll get plenty of knowledge and friends and things like that, but she's never going to have to sit in a desk for 7 hours a day and ask to go to the bathroom. She's never going to be told history as it is rewritten in those schools. She'll be able to ask scary questions, and so I think that's one of the biggest things people can do, is pull.
She won't have to stand up and say the pledge to my flag.
My middle daughter, she's a freshman in high school, and I did do homeschooling with her for COVID and stayed a little while after. However, she begged to go back to public school, and I don't have a lot of say, considering my ex-husband and I share custody of her, and so. But she's got a good head on her shoulders, and she's going to be a career girl. But she doesn't stand for the pledge. Now, I told my children, if you feel like you want to do that, I personally take it as praying to an idol in the state. I don't. Well, both my girls consider themselves anarchists, but I never pushed that. But she just told me she just doesn't do it. And I said, you don't have to even make a scene about it or whatever. And she's like, no, I just don't. She's like, it's kind of weird. And my oldest daughter told me that. She goes, one day I looked around the gym when she was in high school. She's like, this is really weird if you think about it.
Yeah, it is weird, right? It is.
Yeah.
But we're so conditioned to that being the norm that it's like, oh, this is perfectly normal. No, it's not. It's weird.
And most people, you'll get some dirty looks. I do remember, I just sit there and don't make a stink,
Yeah.
But it would be like if somebody was praying to a God I didn't believe in, I'm not going to be like, gosh, I just won't do it.
Yeah.
And So, an old man, something like, can you whatever? And I just said it's a religious thing. People shut right down after that. Now,
Yeah.
they're probably assuming I'm a Jehovah's
Jehovah's
Witness,
Witness,
which I'm
yeah.
not. But hey, it technically is
Right.
religious, like a faith thing.
It is.
So if you ever get crap for that, people just say that. Most people don't say anything after that.
Yeah. But
Or
you
they'll
know,
tell
it's
you why you should be grateful that their great grandfather served in whatever. I
right. Yeah.
don't.
But you know, it does go, if you really look at it, and you kind of mentioned this. I mean, it is its own religion when you really
Mhm.
get down to it. I mean, you've got your rituals, you've got your dogmas, you've got your sacred scriptures, you know, a constitution and a declaration of independence,
You got your
and
tithes.
you've got your tithes, which are coerced, but
And I often say some of the sacraments would be like abortion and war.
right. And you can,
Yeah.
you know, you can go into the temples. I mean, if you've been to Washington, D.C. and seen the Lincoln Monument, that is literally a Greek temple with a
Yes.
president in it, which is
Yes.
creepy, you know?
And yeah, isn't it creepy?
Yeah.
Boy, I remember going to DC so many times because my parents were big, into and
Mhm.
like tearing up at that because I thought I believed a story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
And again, it's this doctrinal narrative that,
Mhm.
and boy, would you start to push back against that, you get that backlash in the same way as if, you know, you're pushing back against the tenets of somebody's faith.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is. I remember years ago when I first became an anarchist, I watched a Larkin Rose YouTube video, and
Mhm.
it's called Statism and Religion. And he
Yes.
talks in the beginning about how he used to compare it to a religion. And then he realized, boom, watching something, oh my God, it actually is
It
a
is.
religion.
Yeah.
And it points out, all the grandeur and the prayer and the emotion it evokes and the music and all that. And I was
Right.
like, wow, it really is. But yeah, you can't start there with some people because if I told my parents that
Right.
they are very, very heavily into politics and very, very right winged.
Yes.
So sometimes I just don't say anything.
I remember one time my wife and I were at some event that I spoke at, and this was back in the early days of my work at the 10th Amendment Center. I was doing a lot of speaking, and a lot of it was at Tea Party groups because the Tea
Mhm.
Party was a big thing, and and they liked the Constitution, so they would have me to speak. And we were at some type of after thing. We were all sitting around a table at a restaurant, and the subject comes up: who is your favorite president? It's like, and even at that point, I was already getting kind of cringy to me, right?
I always say Nixon because he quit.
Because he quit. That's awesome. So they're going around the table. So my wife's sitting next to me, and it's going this way. So it gets to her, and she goes, "I don't know who my favorite is." She goes, "But I tell you, the one that I hate the most." She goes, "Abraham Lincoln." Now, mind you, we're at a table full of Republicans. You could have heard a pin drop, you know.
Oh,
But they
that's
couldn't say anything
awesome.
to her because she's black, right? So they,
Yeah.
what do we do?
Tell me, Cynthia did that on purpose just to make them uncomfortable.
Oh, I'm sure she did.
I love it.
On top of the fact that she wasn't just being, I mean,
Yeah.
she doesn't like Lincoln at all.
Yeah.
She bristles
I'm not
at
a
this whole
fan,
idea
yeah.
that he freed the slaves. She's like, he didn't free
Yeah.
the slaves.
No, he
No, he didn't.
considered black people to be lower mental status. He
Right.
didn't. I mean,
Exactly.
unfortunately, a lot of people did at that time too. So it's
Well,
not
yeah,
like he
of
lived
course.
on an island where he was this, but yeah, he was no savior.
Right. So what are some other things that folks can do to, again, kind of trying to put a buffer, trying to live? I love the Harry Brown book, Living Free in an Unfree World.
Mhm.
What are some other things that you can think of that folks can do that are maybe not that even complicated to help be more free in an unfree world?
Yeah. So a lot of like agorists, or I say agorists, some people say agorists. I'm sure someone will tell me which one is right.
I say
But,
agorist too. So
they talk about gray markets.
Mhm.
So I've discovered and ways to not be taxed on things. Not that I would do it. I don't do that at all.
Of course not.
But if I were to do that, bartering,
Mhm.
cryptocurrency, which
Mhm.
can be volatile and people go into that, but
Right.
using things that the government doesn't get to touch
Mhm.
first. So when you're bartering for employment, when you're flying under the radar, when you can work under the table, all the things that I used to think were bad are actually good.
Right. Yeah.
You can get a lot of things from Mexico and Canada that you can't get here.
Mhm.
So you can surpass the laws. There's lots of ways to do it. There's a lot of cool agorist podcasts out there too, where they kind of go over. Some people will go and literally buy property and live off grid.
Right.
I know quite a few of my friends that have moved to Mexico
Mhm.
and started an anarchist place there. And I don't know if you've seen the documentary. It's not all chaos. Plenty of them are just fine and live a very happy life.
Right. Right.
But I know some of those ideas scare people. But it could be simply the fact that, when you buy something used or you use cash or
Yeah.
barter, and then hedging against inflation, have used goods. These are things that the government messing with the monetary system won't affect you as greatly.
Yeah. I think I think it's really important to, and you kind of touched on this, creating the local relationships, finding places where you can get locally sourced food. So you're not dependent on, the supply chain and some corporate chicken plant, that's going to get shut down 1,000 miles away from you. And then all of a sudden you can't get chicken. And even going simpler than that, know your neighbors. And build relationships with them, friendly relationships, if at all possible, so that if we do end up in a situation where, you start seeing societal breakdown, which I don't, I used to think, oh, that's just crazy talk. I don't know.
It seems to see what we did in 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
COVID was a big wake-up call. The whole response to that was a big wake-up call on what government can and will do and what people will let them do.
Yeah.
But I think it's important, if we do have a situation, I want to know my neighbors. I want to be able to know what they're up to and know that I can depend on them for help if I need it, and that they can depend on me for help in building that type of real community, which I think in America we've lost.
Yeah, we have. Everybody wants, the nuclear family is just in this little, tan box, and we don't go out of the way. That's understandable. Some people aren't super people, I guess,
Right.
people persons. My husband can be a little bit like socially awkward and things like that. And it's actually a funny story. My next door neighbor here had moved in, and, friendly hello, but I don't know them. I don't know their lives. Right. I do know she was recently widowed. She had a son that just graduated and then 2 older kids. But, she got the big, let's go Brandon bumper stickers and this and that.
Yeah.
Nice lady. Well, there was an incident. My husband's a paramedic, and one of the boys' girlfriends was over. There was a situation and she was crying, and I could hear her on the phone with 911. I said, my husband's a paramedic. Can he help you? So he goes in. Anyways, like always, the cops showed up before the medics, and they shouldn't have. There was no reason in this situation. But my husband was there. He was a very quiet man, very smart. So he's watching the whole thing, how it explains what's happening. It gets out of control. We stayed out there, the whole time. And John wrote a very detailed report that was very honest. The cops did not like that.
Of course not.
But I remember talking to them afterwards and explaining, here's what you need to do. You can get the body. I know Medina's laws. You can get the body cameras, blah, 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 da, da, da. And you definitely need an attorney right now. And I remember the girl looking at me and saying, I've just always I've backed the blue, and I'm not somebody that's a crazy liberal or whatever, but I never knew cops could be like this until today. It actually does happen. She literally, those were her words. It actually does happen. And I thought, this is an opportunity, you know what I mean? To help them, number one, defend themselves. And number two, teach that maybe everything isn't the way you think it is.
Yeah.
And now we went rock climbing with them. She's probably the neighbor I know the best now. So yeah.
And what I found, it's like, on social media and in kind of the contemporary culture, our immediate response seems to be feed into the division, right? You see somebody and you see that "Let's Go Brandon" bumper sticker, you go, oh, right winger,
Yeah.
Or you see they got maybe a vote Biden bumper sticker, leftist pig, and And it's true, they may hold really stupid political ideas. But I've found that when you start talking to people on an individual basis, like staying away from politics, you'll find that you have a lot in common with
Mhm.
Everybody. You can find commonality with everybody, right? And when you focus on those, you can build relationships with people, even if you disagree. It's amazing. We can be friends with people that we disagree with
Yes.
politically, you know?
I've said that before, and I've heard some libertarians and anarchists, no, can you really? Somebody that wants to rule over you. I'm like, not everybody even realizes that's
No,
what they're believing.
most people don't, I don't think. You
Yeah.
know, I really do believe that most people, they want to raise their family, they want to better their circumstances, and they want to get along with the people around them. I say this all the time about the whole, you know, we're so there's so much racial division right now.
Mhm.
And I think most of that's politics. Most of it that is fed into by social media and media and talk. When my wife and I go around and actually talk to regular people, I'm not seeing racism around every corner. People treat us just fine. You know?
I think it's completely government and politics. If you realize that since slavery was abolished, we really haven't come as far as we should have
Yeah.
because of all these drug laws that
Mhm.
purposely put and the social welfare system on purpose designed to keep one class of people down.
Yeah.
And then we have political, so everything you have to throw gas on every fire of
Right.
racism. Every, you know what I mean? You can't just see something and say this person said this thing, it's ignorant and racist, and this person, no, we have to destroy that person. How about you ignore that person because they're
Yeah.
an idiot? That
Exactly.
seems like the best thing to do. But yeah, it's they just keep stoking it up because
Yeah.
obviously it gives them power.
Yeah. Back to power.
Yep.
And I've said this, I say this all the time. Politics is toxic. And,
Mhm.
you know, I still do a little bit. I mean, I'm still working at the 10th Amendment Center because I think we're doing some important work in terms of,
Yeah.
again, trying to devolve power away from the central authority. And so I think that stuff is important. But the older I get, the more weary I get of, as you said, fighting all the time.
Yeah.
Who has time for that? I want to live my best life. And even if you take politics as being something that is of value, which I don't, but let's pretend, isn't the idea of politics so that we can live a better life, right?
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to live a better life if you're not living a better life. I tell this to libertarians too. You know, I think there's a lot of them that would still be miserable even if they were completely free. You
Yeah.
know, because they're not doing anything to build up their own lives, to make something, to pour something into their lives and into the lives of others around them. They're so obsessed with politics that becomes their life, and who wants that, right?
Yeah, I read a post, and I like this guy a lot. He's a libertarian, of Iraq vet, smart
Mhm.
guy. But he wrote this post on Independence Day, uh, pretend Independence Day. Let's become mini status day.
Right.
Anyway, but he said, "This holiday, I used to have so many more friends on this holiday and have a good time. It sucks." I said, "You should probably just go hang out with your friends."
Right.
And he's like, "Working for liberty is too important." And I thought, oh my God,
Yeah.
go hang out with some friends, have a barbecue.
Right.
I just, that mindset, it's just, I do think there's a lot of people that use uh, libertarianism and anarchism kind of like it's just a way for them to get their anger out.
Yeah.
And it's not so much about living peacefully and being left alone as much it is about, winning and being mad at the state.
Right.
Well, I got news for you. You're going to be mad for the rest of your life. You're going to
Yeah.
die mad,
Exactly.
because they're not going anywhere. Hopefully,
Right.
we can roll them back and they can get dismantled and we can live in the freest time in history. But, I don't see, if the world, if everything collapses tomorrow, it's not going to be a good life.
No.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
And I tell people this, you know, I'm even the work that I do, this podcast, the things that I write, even honestly, even the constitutional stuff, because let's be honest, we're not going back to the Constitution. That's not a thing. We were never at the Constitution to begin with.
right. Yeah.
But I do what I do because I do think that, you know, if you go back to the American Revolution, John Adams made a very, very keen observation after the Revolutionary War. He said the real revolution was long before the war. He said it was a revolution in thought. It was a change in the way people viewed government, the way people viewed their obligations. And it really was. Say what you will about the founding generation, they certainly weren't, they weren't anarchists, but they were far ahead. It was a big
Mhm.
leap in political thought that
They were quite ahead of their
happened.
time.
Right. And the idea that instead of government being the supreme body that dictates all, the idea that the people, and now we know that there's no such thing as the people, but it was a huge step forward. There was a revolution in thought that moved us from the all-powerful king to a representative government, right? That was a big step. We're going to have a similar revolution in thought to move closer to freedom. You have to have people embrace the idea that we're not going to impose our will on other people, that it's not my job to make sure that you're living a morally pure life, and all of these things that we get hung up on. So really the work that I'm doing is for maybe 2 generations ahead. I'm hoping somebody someday might read what Mike Maharrey wrote and goes, well, those are good ideas.
No, I agree. And I also think it's a good place for people to start too. You can't just grab somebody that, is hugely entrenched in politics and the law and just all of a sudden be like, well, we don't need that. Be like, well, actually it was written to be a lot smaller, and tactically this is what we're supposed to be, ruled by.
Right.
Unless you're like one of those people that craps on the Constitution all the time, which I would never do.
I love those people.
I know. But I think it definitely, you need more people that know what they're talking about and that believe in nonviolence and non-aggression. Because if we do have a collapse, like an economic collapse or things like that, if not enough people know what the hell they're doing or want to act right, they'll clamor for a government, or it'll be horrible.
Yeah.
They're going to want a master real quick.
Right.
So you need enough people that don't need a master before anything collapses.
Exactly.
And I think it is a cool mindset. I mean, there was a time in history where people literally, you talk about the revolution, where they literally thought, I don't have to listen to the king.
Yeah.
That's kind of amazing because most people don't do that. And it's scary, it's scary to speak about government. Sometimes, you can have some feds on your social media.
Yeah.
Or,
Looking at that history, though, it does give me hope, because I know that over time, people's mindsets can change and we can have radical changes in society. You look at something like slavery, you go back 150, 200 years, virtually everybody thought slavery was just fine.
Yeah.
Now, most people don't think slavery is just fine, and therefore we don't have a whole lot of slavery. It still exists, of course, but most people recognize that it's wrong. It's not an acceptable thing because there was a change in the way people viewed the world. I think that same kind of change is possible where people do embrace the idea of nonviolence and embrace the idea of voluntary interactions being kind of the basis of society, because really those are the best ideas, right? So I do have hope. But on the other hand, I don't, like, as you said, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. Thomas Jefferson, I'll throw a Jefferson quote out there. He said that liberty is to be gained by inches. So even he recognized that it's a small step at a time. So meanwhile, go live your life, watch some sports ball, right?
Yes, go sports.
Yes, I know you're a big fan of the sports balls, all of them. So
I got invited to that sports ball group. And I made a post in there. I made a post. I said, this is where I can talk about all my sports. People.
That's great. Anybody knows me, I'm a huge sports guy. And I get it. I mean, I know that this is not the most important thing. It doesn't really matter in the big scheme of things whether or not.
My husband thinks we're not big spectator sports. Right. He likes to rock climb and cycle and stuff like that. But he thinks sports are absolutely necessary because it's what keeps men from wanting war.
I think there's some truth in that. It's much more positive for me to have a Tampa Bay Buccaneers flag on my wall, which I do over there, than and to go Bucks than it is to go America, because when I say go Bucks, nobody's going to die. Right.
There'll be some commercials. Some guys will get on a field. Right. People will yell about it, get mad at each other, and then it'll be
exactly. And then we'll spend 2 weeks dissecting every mistake. Yes. But no, this has been fantastic. It's I'm glad we had this conversation.
Me too.
Why don't you, real quick, before we go, let folks know where they can find your content, because you're making some good stuff out there.
Yeah. So I do a lot of social media. And I also have a podcast, and
Yep.
I guest host on some of the other shows on there as well. So you can find me at Ginger Archy, and it's spelled like it sounds.
Mhm.
Podcast.com. That's my landing page for that. But you can also go to wearelibertarians.com. That's the network that I am on. Lots of great shows on there, all kinds of, from constitutionalists to me, the anarchist. And you can see some of my content there as well. If you want to find me on my social media, just look up Tricia Stuart-Mann. It's hyphenated last name because I'm an ultra raging feminist. Trish Archy on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter much because I suck at it.
Yeah, me too.
Tricia.Stewart on Instagram. But if you go to my Facebook, you can see all my links for shows and everything like that.
Yeah. And I said this before. You're a great follow because I like the fact that you will post this really profound stuff, but then you post some stuff that's just funny. And we need to laugh, right? If we can't laugh, then we need to laugh and have the sports balls.
That's the duality of the ginger anarchist. Yes, I will post the dumbest meme in the world.
It's awesome.
So.
All right. Well, if you are willing, I do a special segment for my fine and wonderful supporting listeners that we call the mudslide round. So if you don't mind, hang out for just a few minutes. We'll do the mudslide round.
I will, but I'm nervous. I hope that I know the answer and don't just stare into oblivion.
That's no. You're going to stare into oblivion, but that's the fun part of it. All right. Well, thank you so much. And if you want to listen to the rest of this, you have to be a supporting listener. You can do that over at GodArchy.org. Thanks, Tricia. All righty then. Well, that's a wrap. I hope you did enjoy that discussion with Tricia, and I'll put the links that she mentioned on the show notes page so that you can keep up with what she's doing, connect with her. She is putting out fantastic content, an important voice in this small but growing world of voluntaryism and anarchism, and also a good friend. So check out her work, check out the show notes page. I'm going to wrap this up and get the editing and production done so you guys can listen to it. And remember, you can support the show over at GodArchy.org and just click on the supporting listener link. And I hope you just have a really fantastic next couple of weeks, and I'll be back with another episode here in about 14 days. Thanks again. See ya. All right, it's time for the ending stuff. Again, thank you so much for listening to the show. Make sure you check out the website, GodArchy.org. You can sign up to our email list there. We're also on social media, on Facebook, at GodArchy.org. We're on the Twitters, at GodArchy. And you can also find us on MeWe. Just look for GodArchy. If you want to contact me, shoot me an email, info@GodArchy.org. And of course, you can support the show. Just go to GodArchy.org, hit the Support GodArchy button, follow the instructions. Again, we really value your listenership. That's all. There's no more. Just listen to the music.
Really